In the quiet countryside of Iowa, where fields stretched endlessly under the wide open sky, there lived a man named Jack Miller. Jack was a farmer, and he loved his work. Every morning he woke up before the sun rose, ate a quick breakfast with his wife Claire, and headed out to tend to his crops and animals. His days were simple but fulfilling. There was something about the smell of fresh soil and the sound of birds chirping that made him feel alive. Jack's farm wasn't large by any means, but it was enough for him and Claire to live comfortably. They grew corn, soybeans, and wheat, and they had a small herd of cattle grazing in the pasture. Jack took pride in what he did. He often said that farming wasn't just a job, it was a way of life. Claire would laugh at this, teasing him gently. "You could grow anything, Jack," she'd say, "but you couldn't grow an interest in anything beyond this farm." One evening, as the golden rays of the setting sun painted the horizon, Jack was outside fixing a broken fence. The wooden posts were old, and one of them had snapped during a recent storm. He hammered the last nail into place and stood back to admire his work. Just as he wiped the sweat from his brow, he noticed something strange in the distance. At first, it looked like a dark cloud descending toward his field, but as it drew closer, Jack realized it wasn't a cloud at all. It was a ship, smooth, metallic, and glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. The hum of its engines grew louder, and the ground trembled slightly as it landed only a few yards away from where Jack stood. His heart raced. What was this? Was it some kind of military aircraft? Or worse, had he stumbled upon something dangerous? Before he could decide whether to run or investigate, a door on the side of the ship slid open. Two figures stepped out, their forms tall and slender, wrapped in shimmering robes that seemed to shift colors with every movement. "Greetings, human," one of them said in a voice that sounded both deep and melodic. "We are envoys of the Zarathian Empire." Jack blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. The Zarathian Empire. He had never heard of such a thing. Hi," he stammered, taking a cautious step back. "Can I help you?" The second figure tilted its head, studying him intently. "Your name is Jack Miller, correct?" it asked. "Yes," Jack replied, his voice tinged with confusion. "But how do you know that?" "We have been monitoring your planet," the first envoy explained. "Earth has been selected to participate in the Galactic Games, a prestigious tournament held across the galaxy. Your name has been chosen through a random lottery system." Jack stared at them, dumbfounded. "Wait, what? Me? You've got the wrong guy. I'm just a farmer." The envoys exchanged a glance as if silently communicating. Then the taller one spoke again. "There is no mistake. You are required to represent Earth in the competition." "Required?" Jack echoed, his voice rising. "I don't even know what this is about. I can't fight aliens or whatever you're expecting me to do." "It is not optional," the second envoy said firmly. "Failure to comply will result in severe consequences for your planet. Non-compliance is considered an act of defiance against the Zarathian Empire." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. This couldn't be real. Aliens showing up in his field, telling him he had to leave everything behind to compete in some intergalactic contest? It sounded like something out of a movie. But the look in the envoy's eyes told him they weren't joking. Claire came running out of the house, her face pale with worry. "Jack, what's going on?" she demanded, looking from him to the strange visitors. "They say I have to go with them," Jack muttered, still trying to process the situation. "Some kind of space tournament?" Claire's jaw dropped. "Are you serious? You can't just leave. What about the farm? What about us?" The envoys ignored her protests. "You have 24 hours to prepare," the taller one announced. "After that, we depart for Xylo 7, the arena world where the games will take place." With that, they turned and walked back into the ship. The hatch closed behind them, and moments later, the vessel lifted off the ground, disappearing into the sky. Jack and Claire stood in stunned silence, watching until the ship was nothing more than a distant speck. "This is insane," Claire finally said, breaking the quiet. "What are we supposed to do now?" Jack sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. "I don't know." Maybe they'll forget about me. Maybe this is all just some weird dream. But deep down he knew better. The ship had been real, the envoys had been real, and the threat they carried was very much real. For the rest of the night, Jack paced back and forth trying to come up with a plan. He thought about calling the authorities, but who would believe him? Who could possibly help? The next morning the ship returned. This time Jack didn't argue. He packed a small bag with clothes and a few essentials, hugged Claire tightly, and promised her he'd find a way back. As he boarded the alien craft, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change forever. Inside the ship, Jack marveled at the technology surrounding him. The walls glowed softly, and the air smelled clean and crisp, unlike anything he'd experienced before. The envoys led him to a seat and strapped him in securely. Within minutes, the ship ascended, leaving Earth far behind. Looking out the window, Jack watched as his home planet shrank into a tiny blue dot. A wave of homesickness washed over him, but he forced himself to stay calm. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it. After all, he reminded himself, farmers were used to dealing with unexpected challenges, whether it was bad weather, pests, or equipment breaking down. They adapted and persevered. As the ship sped through the vastness of space, Jack couldn't help but wonder what exactly awaited him at the Galactic Games. Would he be pitted against giant monsters, super smart robots, other humans? One thing was certain. He was completely unprepared for whatever was coming. Yet despite his fear, a small spark of determination flickered within him. If he could handle the unpredictability of farming, maybe, just maybe, he could handle this too. When the ship finally landed on Xylos 7, Jack stepped out into a world unlike anything he had ever seen. The air shimmered with strange colors, and the ground beneath his feet felt smooth, almost like glass. Towering structures rose into the sky, their surfaces glowing faintly as if alive. Around him, beings of all shapes and sizes moved about, some walking on two legs, others floating or crawling. The noise was overwhelming, a mix of alien languages, mechanical hums, and distant cheers. The envoys led Jack through the crowded streets toward a large facility where competitors were being housed. Along the way, Jack couldn't help but gawk at the other contestants. Some looked human-like, though taller or with unusual features like glowing eyes or extra limbs. Others were monstrous, covered in scales or fur, with claws sharp enough to cut steel. Every now and then one of them would glance at Jack, their expressions ranging from curiosity to disdain. Inside the facility, Jack was assigned a room that was surprisingly comfortable. It had a bed, a table, and what appeared to be a device for food. A small screen on the wall displayed information in symbols he didn't understand. He sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling completely out of place. This wasn't just another day on the farm. This was something else entirely. Later that day, Jack met his handler, an alien named Kale. Kale was shorter than most of the other beings Jack had seen, with pale green skin and wide, unblinking eyes. His voice was sharp and impatient as he introduced himself. "You are my responsibility," Kale said flatly. "I will prepare you for the games." "Prepare me?" Jack asked, raising an eyebrow. "What exactly am I supposed to do?" Kale sighed, clearly frustrated. "You are here to fight, to win, or at least survive." Jack frowned. "But I'm not a fighter. I told those envoys back on Earth, I'm just a farmer." "That is irrelevant," Kale snapped. "The rules are clear. Every planet must send a champion. You were chosen. Now you must compete." Over the next few days, Kyle attempted to train Jack in basic combat techniques. They started with simple exercises, how to throw a punch, how to block an attack, but it quickly became apparent that Jack was hopeless. He stumbled over his own feet, missed targets by a wide margin, and struggled to keep up with even the easiest drills. Kale grew increasingly exasperated. "You cannot possibly expect to win like this," Kale muttered one afternoon after Jack tripped over his own shadow during a sparring session. "Your opponent will crush you without effort." Jack wiped the sweat from his face and sighed. Look, I get it, okay? I'm not built for this, but maybe there's another way. Cale tilted his head, intrigued despite himself. Another way? I don't know, Jack admitted. Something smarter, something unexpected. Kyle stared at him for a moment, then shook his head. There is no time for cleverness. You face Vraxtor, the Galactic Champion, in 3 days. He has never lost a match, ever. Jack swallowed hard. Great, just great. That evening, Jack wandered outside the facility, needing some fresh air. The arena loomed in the distance, its massive structure illuminated by bright lights. Crowds of spectators milled about, chatting excitedly about the upcoming matches. Jack found a quiet spot away from the noise and sat down, staring up at the unfamiliar stars. For the first time since arriving, he allowed himself to feel anger. Not at the situation, he couldn't change that, but at the arrogance of the Zorathians and everyone else who thought Earth was weak. They saw humans as primitive, insignificant, and maybe compared to these advanced civilizations they were. But Jack knew better than anyone that strength didn't always come from muscles or weapons. Sometimes it came from knowing when to act and when to wait. As he sat there, he began to think about Vraxtor. He hadn't seen the champion fight yet, but Cale had described him as a towering brute with armor plating and a weapon capable of disintegrating opponents. Jack imagined what it might be like to face such a creature. Fear crept into his mind, but so did determination. If brute force wouldn't work, then he'd have to rely on something else. Back on Earth, Claire tried her best to stay positive. She watched broadcasts of the Galactic Games whenever she could, though the commentators rarely mentioned Jack. Instead, they focused on the more impressive competitors, warriors with glowing swords, telekinetic powers, or robotic enhancements. Still, Claire refused to give up hope. She remembered something Jack used to say when dealing with stubborn cattle. Sometimes all it takes is a little push. Inspired by this memory, Claire decided to take action. She reached out to Hank, a retired engineer who lived nearby. Hank had once worked on experimental farming equipment, and though he was older now, his mind was still sharp. Together they brainstormed ideas based on tools Jack might recognize. We need something simple, Claire said, something he can use without thinking too much. Hank nodded thoughtfully. What about a plow blade? It's sturdy, easy to handle, and versatile. Plus, Jack knows how to use one. Claire smiled. Perfect. They worked late into the night modifying a design and sending it to the Zorathian communication array set up near Jack's farm. With any luck, the message would reach him before the match. Meanwhile, Jack continued to observe Vraxtor during practice sessions. The champion was indeed massive, standing nearly twice the height of an average human. His movements were slow, but deliberate, each step shaking the ground beneath him. When he swung his weapon, it left trails of energy in the air. Opponents fell quickly, often retreating before Vraxtor could deliver a finishing blow. Despite his fear, Jack noticed something important. Vraxtor relied heavily on intimidation. He expected his enemies to cower, to hesitate. Jack realized that if he could make Vraxtor doubt himself, even for a second, he might stand a chance. On the day before the match, a message arrived from Earth. Jack read it carefully, his heart swelling with gratitude. Claire reminded him of their shared belief in perseverance and resourcefulness. We're rooting for you, she wrote. Remember, sometimes all it takes is a little push. With renewed resolve, Jack spent the rest of the day visualizing his strategy. He would lead Vraxtor to the edge of the platform, feign weakness, and wait for the perfect moment to strike. It was risky, but it was all he had. That night as he lay in bed, Jack thought about his life back on the farm. He missed the simplicity of it, the rhythm of the seasons, the satisfaction of a hard day's work. But he also realized that this experience, however terrifying, was teaching him something valuable. Sometimes life threw challenges your way that seemed impossible to overcome, and sometimes you just had to trust yourself to find a way through. As sleep finally claimed him, Jack whispered a silent promise to himself. No matter what happened tomorrow, he would give it everything he had. The day of the match arrived, and the atmosphere was electric. Spectators filled the stands of the massive arena, their voices rising in a cacophony of cheers and chants. Beings from across the galaxy had gathered to witness the spectacle, their eyes fixed on the central platform where competitors would face off. Jack stood behind the curtain, his heart pounding as he listened to the roar of the crowd. He felt small and out of place, but he reminded himself why he was here, not just for Earth, but for everyone who doubted what a simple farmer could do. Kale appeared beside him, holding a device that looked like a metallic gauntlet. "This is your weapon," Kale said, pressing it into Jack's hand. "It will amplify your strength slightly. Use it wisely." Jack examined the gauntlet, turning it over in his hands. It was sleek and cool to the touch, with glowing circuits running along its surface. He wasn't sure how much help it would be against someone like Vraxtor, but he nodded anyway. "Thanks," he muttered, slipping it onto his arm. Moments later, an announcer's voice boomed through the arena introducing the competitors. The crowd erupted as Vraxtor stepped onto the platform, his armored form towering above everything around him. His weapon, a massive club crackling with energy, was slung over his shoulder, and his expression radiated confidence. When Jack emerged from behind the curtain, the noise shifted. Some spectators laughed, others jeered, and a few simply stared in disbelief. A human against Vraxtor? It seemed impossible. Jack ignored the mockery as he walked to his side of the platform. He took a deep breath, focusing on the plan he had rehearsed in his mind. He glanced down at the gauntlet, then back at Vraxtor. The champion sneered, clearly unimpressed. To him, Jack was nothing more than a weakling, an easy victory. The referee, a floating orb-like creature, hovered between them. Its voice echoed as it explained the rules. No weapons outside of those provided, no interference from handlers, and the match would end when one competitor fell off the platform or conceded. With a flash of light, the orb signaled the start of the fight. Vraxtor wasted no time. He charged forward with surprising speed for someone so large, raising his club high above his head. Jack scrambled to dodge, narrowly avoiding the blow as the weapon slammed into the ground where he had been standing moments before. The impact sent shockwaves rippling across the platform, nearly knocking Jack off his feet. The crowd roared, delighted by the display of power. Jack stumbled backward, trying to regain his footing. Vraxtor swung again, this time aiming lower. Jack barely managed to leap out of the way, his heart racing as he realized how close he had come to being crushed. He couldn't keep dodging. Forever. He needed to act. Slowly, Jack began maneuvering toward the edge of the platform, making his movements appear clumsy and desperate. He let Vraxtor corner him, feigning fear as he backed away. The champion grinned, relishing the chase. Each swing of his club came closer to hitting its mark, forcing Jack to retreat further. As they neared the edge, Jack planted his feet firmly, bracing himself. He waited until Vraxtor lunged once more, swinging his club with all his might. At the last second, Jack sidestepped, letting the weapon pass harmlessly beside him. Then, summoning every ounce of strength he possessed, he shoved Vraxtor with both hands. The move caught the champion completely off guard. Vraxtor's momentum carried him forward, and for a brief moment, he teetered on the edge of the platform. The crowd gasped, their cheers turning to stunned silence. Then, with a thunderous crash, Vraxtor toppled over the side, disappearing from view. Time seemed to freeze. Jack stood there, breathing heavily, unable to believe what had just happened. Had he really done it? Had he actually defeated the Galactic champion? A moment later, the referee orb floated down to confirm the result. After a quick scan, it declared in a booming voice, "Victory goes to Jack Miller of Earth." The arena erupted into chaos. Some spectators cheered wildly, while others shouted in disbelief. Reporters rushed to the platform, their cameras flashing, as they captured the historic moment. Jack blinked, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. He hadn't expected this kind of reaction. Claire watched the broadcast back on Earth, tears streaming down her face. She jumped up from her chair, clapping and laughing with joy. Hank sat beside her, grinning ear to ear. "I told you he could do it," he said proudly. In the days that followed, Jack became a global sensation. News outlets replayed footage of the match endlessly, analyzing every detail of his strategy. People marveled at how a simple farmer had managed to defeat one of the strongest warriors in the galaxy. For the first time, humanity was seen not as primitive, but as clever and resourceful. Despite the newfound fame, Jack remained humble. When reporters asked him how he had pulled off such an incredible feat, he shrugged and gave credit to his farming background. "Farming teaches you to adapt," he said. "You learn to work with what you've got, even if it doesn't seem like enough." The Zorathian envoys approached him after the tournament, offering congratulations and inviting him to join elite teams or become a spokesperson for humanity, but Jack politely declined. "I appreciate the offer," he told them, "but my place is back on Earth. I've got crops to tend to." When Jack finally returned home, Claire greeted him with open arms. The farm looked exactly as he had left, yet peaceful and familiar. As he walked through the fields, he felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the life he had, but for the lesson he had learned. Sometimes the simplest solutions were the most effective, and sometimes all it took was a little push. Life slowly returned to normal, though Jack occasionally received visitors seeking advice or inspiration. Farmers, students, and even politicians came to hear his story. Claire always smiled when they asked if Jack planned to compete again. "He's done enough," she'd say. "After all, sometimes all it takes is a little push." And so, Jack Miller remained a symbol of resilience, proving that courage and cleverness could triumph over sheer power, even in the vast expanse of the galaxy. The days following Jack's victory were a whirlwind of activity. Reporters from across the galaxy descended upon Earth, eager to learn more about the human farmer who had accomplished the impossible. News crews set up camp near Jack's farm, their cameras capturing every movement he made. At first, Jack tried to ignore them, going about his daily chores as if nothing had changed. But it quickly became clear that life would never be the same. Claire did her best to shield him from the chaos. She politely turned away interview requests and redirected curious visitors to a designated area near the edge of their property. "He's just a regular guy," she told one particularly persistent journalist. "He doesn't want all this attention." But the attention wasn't going anywhere. Jack's story had captured the imagination of people everywhere. Children drew pictures of him shoving Vraxtor off the platform. Teachers used his victory as an example of ingenuity and perseverance. Even politicians cited him as proof that humanity could hold its own against more advanced civilizations. Despite the noise surrounding him, Jack remained grounded. He spent his mornings tending to the fields, just as he always had. The rhythmic motion of plowing the soil and planting seeds helped calm his mind. In the afternoons, he repaired fences or checked on the cattle, finding comfort in tasks that required no thought beyond the present moment. Still, there were moments when the weight of what he had done pressed heavily on him. Late at night, when the house was quiet and Claire slept beside him, Jack would lie awake staring at the ceiling. He thought about Vraxtor, about the crowd's reaction, about the way the galaxy now viewed Earth. Was it enough? Could one person really change how others saw an entire planet? One morning, as Jack worked in the barn, a man appeared at the edge of the field. He wore plain clothes, jeans and a flannel shirt, and carried a notebook in his hand. Jack recognized him immediately. It was Martin Cole, a well-known writer who specialized in human interest stories. Martin had interviewed countless heroes, but something about Jack intrigued him. "Mind if I join you?" Martin asked, stepping closer. Jack hesitated, then nodded. "Sure, just don't get in the way." Martin smiled and leaned against the fence while Jack finished feeding the horses. When Jack finally joined him, Martin wasted no time getting to the heart of the matter. "You've become a symbol, Jack," he said. "People are calling you the face of humanity." Jack frowned. "I didn't ask for that, I just wanted to go home." "I know," Martin replied. "But sometimes things happen that are bigger than us. You showed the galaxy that humans aren't weak, that we can think our way out of problems instead of relying on brute force." Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It wasn't just me." My wife, Claire, helped come up with the idea. And Hank, he's the one who figured out how to modify that tool I used. If anything, they deserve the credit. Martin scribbled notes in his book. Maybe so. But it was your strength, your determination that made it work. Tell me, what was going through your mind when you faced Vraxtor? Jack thought for a moment before answering. Fear, mostly. I knew I couldn't beat him the way he expected, so I focused on what I could control, how I moved, where I stood when I acted. I remembered something my dad used to say. Sometimes the best defense is knowing when to step back. Martin nodded, clearly impressed. That's powerful. Do you think you'll ever compete again? No, Jack said firmly. Once was enough. I'm happy here, doing what I know best. As the weeks passed, the initial frenzy began to die down. Reporters packed up their equipment and returned to their home planets. The crowds thinned, leaving Jack and Claire alone once more, but the impact of Jack's victory lingered. Farmers sent letters thanking him for representing their way of life. Scientists studied his strategy, hoping to apply similar thinking to interstellar diplomacy. Even the Zorathian Empire acknowledged Earth's potential, promising to include humans in future discussions about galactic cooperation. For Jack, the changes were subtle but meaningful. He received invitations to speak at events, though he rarely accepted them. On the rare occasions he did, he kept his messages simple. We're not perfect, he'd say, but we're resourceful. We adapt, and we don't give up. One day, a group of students visited the farm as part of a school trip. They gathered around Jack, wide-eyed and full of questions. How did you know what to do? One boy asked. Jack chuckled. Honestly, I didn't. I just trusted myself to figure it out. Another student raised her hand. Do you miss space? Not really, Jack admitted. It was exciting, sure, but there's nothing like coming home. After the students left, Claire found Jack sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. She sat down beside him, leaning her head on his shoulder. You handled that well, she said softly. They're good kids, Jack replied. Curious, eager to learn. You inspire them, Claire added. Even if you don't see it. Jack shook his head. I'm just a farmer, Claire, nothing special. You're wrong, she said firmly. You proved that anyone can make a difference, no matter where they come from or what they do. You gave people hope. Jack didn't respond right away. Instead, he gazed out at the fields, golden in the fading light. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel a sense of pride, not in what he had done, but in what it represented. Humanity wasn't defined by its technology or weapons. It was defined by its spirit, its ability to rise above challenges and find solutions in unexpected places. As the stars began to appear in the night sky, Jack stood and stretched. Let's head inside, he said. Tomorrow's another day. Claire smiled and took his hand. Together they walked back into the house, ready to face whatever the future held. Life on the farm continued much as it always had, but now it carried a deeper meaning. Jack Miller wasn't just a farmer anymore. He was a reminder that even the simplest among us could achieve greatness when given the chance. And so, Jack returned to his routines, content to live quietly and let the world move on without him. Yet, whenever someone asked about his time in the Galactic Games, he offered the same advice. Sometimes all it takes is a little push. Years passed and life on the farm settled into a comfortable rhythm. Jack Miller continued his work as if nothing extraordinary had ever happened. He planted seeds in the spring, harvested crops in the fall, and cared for his animals with the same steady hands that had once pushed a galactic champion off a platform. To him, the victory was a distant memory, something tucked away like an old photograph in a drawer. But to the rest of the world, it remained a defining moment. On Earth, Jack's story became legend. Children grew up hearing about the farmer who outsmarted Vraxtor, the towering brute no one thought could be defeated. Teachers used his tale to teach lessons about creativity, perseverance, and the power of thinking differently. In cities, and small towns alike, murals were painted depicting Jack standing tall against the backdrop of the galaxy, his arms raised in triumph. Though he never sought fame, it found him anyway, weaving itself into the fabric of human culture. Jack didn't mind the attention as much as he used to. Over time, he learned to accept it as part of his life, even if he still preferred the quiet, solitude of his fields. Occasionally, he would receive letters from people around the world, farmers, students, soldiers, all sharing how his story had inspired them. Some wrote to thank him for reminding them that strength wasn't always physical. Others simply wanted to know what it felt like to stand face to face with an alien warrior. Jack answered every letter, keeping his responses short and humble. Claire often teased him about becoming a celebrity. "You're famous now," she'd say with a grin. "Should we start charging admission?" Jack would laugh and shake his head. "Not a chance. This is our home, not a museum." Still, there were moments when the weight of his legacy caught up with him. Late at night, when the house was silent and the stars shone brightly through the window, Jack would think about the galaxy beyond Earth. He wondered if Raxtor had recovered from the loss, if the champion still remembered the human who had bested him. More importantly, he wondered if humanity's place among the stars had truly changed, or if it was all just temporary excitement. One day, as Jack worked in the barn, a familiar hum filled the air. At first he thought it was a trick of the wind, but then he saw it. A sleek metallic ship descending into the field. His heart skipped a beat. Had the Zorathians returned? Was this another summons to compete? The ship landed gently, and a figure stepped out. To Jack's surprise, it wasn't an envoy or a representative of some distant empire. It was Kale, his former handler from the Galactic Games. The alien looked much the same as he had years ago, pale green skin, wide unblinking eyes, but there was a warmth in his expression that hadn't been there before. "Jack Miller," Kale said, inclining his head slightly. "May I speak with you?" Jack nodded, setting down his tools. "Of course, what brings you here?" Kale glanced around the farm, taking in the rolling hills and golden fields. "I came to see your world, and to thank you." "Thank me?" Jack repeated, confused. "For what?" "For showing us something we had forgotten," Kale explained. "The Zorathian Empire has long believed that strength lies in power, weapons, technology, domination. But you proved that true strength comes from adaptability, cleverness, and courage. Your victory made us reconsider our values." Jack scratched the back of his neck, unsure how to respond. "I didn't mean to make anyone rethink anything, I just did what I had to do." "And that is precisely why it mattered," Kale said. "You acted not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. You reminded us that even the smallest beings can achieve greatness when they refuse to give up." They sat together under the shade of a tree, talking for hours. Kale shared stories of how the Galactic Games had changed since Jack's victory. New rules had been introduced to encourage strategy over brute force. Competitors were now judged not only on their wins, but also on their ingenuity and sportsmanship. Most importantly, Earth had earned a permanent seat at the Interstellar Council, ensuring humanity's voice would be heard in matters affecting the galaxy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the field, Kayla stood to leave. "Thank you for your time, Jack Miller," he said. "You have done more than you realize." Jack watched as the alien climbed back into the ship and took off into the sky. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of closure. His journey had come full circle, not because he sought recognition, but because he had stayed true to himself. Back inside the house, Claire listened intently as Jack recounted the visit. When he finished, she smiled softly. "See? I told you. You're more important than you think." "I don't know about that," Jack replied. "But maybe it's okay to let people believe in something bigger." The next morning, Jack woke early, as he always did. He walked outside to find the fields bathed in dew, the air crisp and cool. As he began his daily chores, he noticed something unusual, a single stalk of corn growing taller than the others, its leaves shimmering faintly in the sunlight. It reminded him of the glowing walls of the Zorathian ship, of the strange beauty he had encountered in space. He smiled to himself and patted the stalk gently. "Well, aren't you something?" he murmured. Later that week, a group of visitors arrived at the farm, scientists eager to study the mysterious plant. They theorized it might be a result of alien influence, perhaps a gift left behind by Kale or the Zorathians. Jack didn't care about the explanation. To him, it was simply another reminder of how interconnected everything was: the soil beneath his feet, the stars above his head, and the countless lives touched by a single act of bravery. As the seasons changed, so too did the farm. The shimmering cornstalk grew stronger, producing kernels unlike any seen before. Farmers from neighboring towns came to marvel at it, and soon, word spread across the globe. Scientists dubbed it Miller's Miracle, a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of humanity. Jack continued living his simple life, content to let others draw meaning from the miracle crop. He knew that whether it was farming, fighting, or facing the unknown, the same principles applied: adapt, persevere, and trust yourself. Sometimes all it took was a little push. And so, Jack Miller remained a symbol of hope, not just for Earth, but for the entire galaxy. His name became synonymous with the idea that greatness could emerge from the most unexpected places. Yet, to those who knew him best, he was simply a farmer, a man who loved his land, cherished his family, and believed in the power of ordinary people to change the world. Years later, when Jack's hair had turned gray and his hands bore the marks of decades of hard work, he sat on the porch with Claire, watching the sunset. The field stretched endlessly before them, alive with the promise of tomorrow. Somewhere in the distance, children laughed as they played, their voices carrying on the breeze. "You've done good, Jack," Claire said quietly, resting her hand. On his, Jack smiled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "We all have," he replied, "together."